right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Everybody ready? Clap twice if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Excellent. Lots of you can hear me. That's what we're going for. My name is Kelly Schrader. I'm the Assistant Director for Title IX and Integrated Prevention Education. I work in Student Wellness Services. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Quinn Russell, who will be our Interim Coordinator in the Office of Sexual Violence Prevention and Response. She's going to say a few words. Quinn? Woo!
Good afternoon. I did that to make you all feel comfortable. Hi, I'm Quinn, and I'm actually an Evergreen grad, and I've spent the past year working in Student Wellness Services as a graduate counseling intern, and I'm continuing that job this year as well. And I'm also doing this job as the interim coordinator for the OSVP office. And I just wanted to introduce myself, show you my face, let you know that we're available to you there. You can get in touch with us through the front desk at Student Wellness Services, which is in SEM 1, right? Yeah. SEM 1. And I'm just really looking forward to supporting the Evergreen community this year and being a resource to anyone who is being affected by sexual violence. So I hope you all have a really great year. And take care of yourselves and each other, and thanks.
Okay, so I want you to take a few minutes. You put one hand in the air, take your other hand, you're taking your pulse. This is fingers on the pulse of you. While I love looking at you with all of your arms in the air, you put them down. It's funny from up here. So fingers on the pulse of you. We are going to address topics like sexual violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment, relationship violence, and stalking. Can we see my slide? Thank you. If you need to step out at any time, you have your fingers on the pulse of you. You will know if this information is triggering for you, and we know that we have survivors in the room. If you need to step out at any time, my colleagues from the Counseling Center are available. Colleagues? Yes, take a look. Most of them are in the back by the bleachers. If you need to step out or you're feeling triggered and you need to speak to a confidential resource, these are your people today. You can seek them out. You can step out into the hallway for a more private conversation. You can speak with them, or they can get you connected to our county sexual assault program, Safe Place, which provides a 24-hour confidential advocacy line. These are your services for today if anyone is feeling like this information has triggered for something for them or that it's too much. Today we're going to talk about two topics. We're really going to talk about some of the evergreen resources and procedures that exist around sexual assault, relationship violence, and stalking. And then we're going to talk about how you can prevent these things from happening on campus. I believe that every single one of us has the responsibility to end the epidemic of sexual violence on college campuses. That sounds like a tall order, but I know you can do it, and I know that I can teach you how to do it. That's what we're going to spend our time on today. We have seen this come to the forefront. This issue is not new. Sexual assault, relationship violence, and stalking have been happening for years. We've simply started to shine a light on a problem that used to exist in the shadows. Many things have brought this out into the light. This picture is from the promotional materials for a film called The Hunting Ground, which was made by the same filmmakers who made the documentary The Invisible War. And they took their documentary filmmaking lens and turned that to college campuses. We actually own a copy of this in our library, and it's available for students to check out. We do film screenings a few times a year as part of our awareness raising events and education events. Students, you all, and young alumni have really been at the front of the movement to make this a conversation that we are having nationally. The folks at Know Your 9 and End Rape on Campus are students who were affected by these issues while they were in college, and while they were students, and then as young alumni said, I don't think my school handled this well. And I think that schools in general need to be handling this better. And they took their activism and organizing skills and said, hey, Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education, you have enforcement of Title IX, which is a federal civil rights law that protects students from sex discrimination in education programs and activities. And they said, we want you to enforce this. We think our schools didn't handle this well. This has happened over the years. Starting in 2011, the game changed on college campuses about how we address this issue, how we do prevention, how we respond to issues when students report them to us. And we have students like yourselves and young alumni to thank for the activism around this issue. I think we have a brief video. Give it up for our wonderful electronic media crew, folks.
Nine things to know about Title IX in 89 seconds.
1. Title IX is a landmark federal civil rights law that prohibits sex discrimination in education. Title IX is not just about sports. It also addresses sexual harassment, gender-based discrimination, and sexual violence.
2. Title IX does not apply to female students only. Male and gender nonconforming students are protected too.
3. Schools must be proactive in ensuring that your campus is free of sex discrimination. They can't just wait for something to go wrong.
4. Schools must have an established procedure for handling complaints of sex discrimination, harassment, and violence.
5. Schools must take immediate action to ensure that a survivor can continue his or her education safely.
Number 6. Schools may not retaliate or let someone else retaliate against a victim filing a complaint.
7. Schools can issue a no-contact directive to prevent the accused student from interacting with you, kind of like a restraining order from your school.
8. In cases of sexual violence, schools are prohibited from encouraging or allowing informal mediation of the complaint rather than a formal hearing.
9. Schools cannot discourage you from your continuing education since you have a right to education under Title IX.
You have a right to remain on campus and have every educational program and opportunity available to you.
If your rights aren't being respected, you have options. Visit knowyour9.org and check us out on Facebook and Twitter.
I thought the folks there could do a better job of explaining in 90 seconds what Title IX is to you than I probably could. And of course, it's in their voice and their words. I'm the college's Title IX coordinator. In addition to going to some place like Know Your Nine, you can come to my office. It's my job to oversee our processing.
History of this country because of that breakthrough legislation which was passed.
I'm not sure, do you hear that? Oh, so there, like one of these things was sort of talking to me, and I was like, wait a second, what is going on? It's a very jarring experience, y'all. I'm sorry, I got a little flustered. I'm the college's Title IX coordinator. So in addition, if you feel like if you are affected, if you want to make a complaint or a report to the college, you can start with me. If you, as in the video they ended with, if you think your rights aren't being respected, go to knowyour9.org. You're welcome to check them out. You're also able to come to me. I'm able to provide services to folks who want to make a report about something that happened, folks who want to say, I think something happened to my friend and I want to figure out how to help them, and oversee our general processes in response to sexual violence, harassment, and discrimination on campus. It's important to note that I work with Quinn. Quinn provides a confidential resource. My services are strictly private, but I can't keep the confidentiality the way a lawyer or a doctor can. So Quinn's services are completely confidential. My services are strictly private, and I can't release information about students due to the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. So, one thing I want you to know as you get started here at Evergreen is that all employees, faculty, RAs, staff, are considered responsible employees. What does that mean? What the heck does that mean? It means that everyone is required to report information that they receive from students about sexual violence, harassment, and discrimination. So if you or someone you know makes a disclosure to a faculty person, to their RA, to an academic advisor, that person is required to report that information to me. Because as you heard from the Know Your Nine folks, we are required to respond and take immediate action. And so in order to provide students with the very best services possible, we ask all of our staff and faculty to report information to me so that we can then start by reaching out to the person who may have been hurt to ask them what their needs are. What do you want? What do you need in this moment? How can we help you continue your education? It's important to note that disclosing something to staff or faculty who are then going to report that information to me does not launch an investigation. If someone wants to use our student conduct procedures or our police services folks to make a report about something that's happened to them and they want an investigation of that incident, that's absolutely available to you. But that is absolutely a choice that someone has about how they want to proceed. Because the last thing that we want to do is take away a choice from someone who has already had their power violated. Confidential resources are available in student wellness services. In addition to Quinn, we have medical and counseling providers who can help students with things like STI testing, emergency contraception, and general therapy. I want to talk a minute about sexual misconduct. Many of you may have heard this before, but it's so important it warrants mentioning again. Our definition of sexual misconduct from the Student Conduct Code. Consent means that at the time of the act of sexual intercourse or sexual contact, there are actual words or conduct indicating a voluntary and mutually understandable agreement between the parties to engage in actions or behaviors. Consent may not be given or granted when one's capacity for effective decision-making has been diminished by the use of alcohol or drugs, or a person is unconscious or is experiencing some other cognitive impairment. Consent is not considered voluntary when obtained through threats, intimidation, or coercion. I hope that this is something folks can understand, and if it's hard to understand, I get that, right? What does this mean? What does effective decision-making mean? I encourage you that if you have questions about what we are asking you to do in our Student Conduct Code, that you ask those questions proactively. I'll be available after the session. My colleagues from Health and Counsel from the Student Wellness Services will be available, and you can absolutely approach our Senior Conduct Administrator, Andrea Sieber-Olson. Please ask those questions proactively, because then you'll be fully informed and you can make choices. In real life, sometimes consent is tough. What we are asking you to do, there are very few models in the world. This isn't something that we see modeled in media or social media or in our culture in general. The culture change around this topic, I firmly believe, is coming from college campuses. Whether it's folks like you who are going to be here today and learn how to make your campus safer, or folks like the activists that we saw in the video. It is going to be you all that help to change the culture in the United States around this issue. A great website I like, Scarletine, and you can just Google Scarletine and you'll get this. This is the homepage. So if you're coming here and saying, I really want to learn more about this. I really want to educate myself on sexual harassment, discrimination, and violence. I want to be able to go into this college experience knowing more than what I'm coming here with. This is a great resource. We've got one final video. There are some celebrity friends here to give you some more information.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Another great website. This is an initiative that was launched by Vice President Joe Biden. I went to graduate school at the University of Delaware, and I got to meet Joe Biden at the grocery store. It was crazy. And so this is a great initiative from the White House and Vice President Joe Biden. It's on us. It's on us to say we are going to end this in our communities. I want you to think about a time, and this is just for yourself, we won't have any discussion. I want you to think about a time that you asked for or gave consent. What would you do differently in the future, given the information you've gotten over the last couple of days? Take a moment just to consider that for yourself. Earlier today, I talked about being able to get some information, to contemplate it, and then make your choices. This is also one of those situations where you will receive information, you can think about your actions and make an informed choice about what you want to do. If something happens to you or a friend, we also saw this morning in some of our information that students are really interested in information about how to help others, how to help the people that they're friends with or in their classes. You can start at Student Wellness Services in the Office of Sexual Violence Prevention and Response, and that allows you to ask questions or talk about what happened in a completely confidential setting. You have the option to make a report to me, the Title IX coordinator. You can also report things anonymously, and I've got to tell you, this is a function that our students have been using a lot. If you search incident report from the Evergreen homepage, that form will pop up, and you can give us anonymous information about something you're concerned about. Students might describe something like, I was at a party and I saw this thing I'm worried about, or I heard someone on my residence hall floor describing this, and I'm concerned. That information allows us to follow up without you having to identify yourself. Again, this function has become very popular, and I encourage you to make sure you take a look at this. Students may also report incidents to police services. Seminar 1, 2150, it's right on the right-hand side if you're walking from the library building. The emergency number, 867-6140 or 911. We're going to transition to Green Dot, which is our program on campus to ask all of you a question. Will you do something or will you do nothing when confronted with the option to make our campus safer? It's a question I'll ask you a couple of different ways in a couple of different forms today, and I'm going to give you some tools that if you choose to do something, you'll have the ability to act when needed. I have a lot of personal connections to this issue. I can remember very early on in my career, I didn't necessarily have as much knowledge as I have now. I hadn't really gotten into working on sexual assault prevention on college campuses yet. And I sat with a student in my office. I was a resident director in a large residence hall. I sat with a student in my office who was there because they had a potential conduct code violation. And I was talking with them, and as they described what happened over the course of the evening, this person got closer and closer to describing that they had had a sexual encounter that might not have been quite all right with them. And as I sat there with the student, I faced a choice. Do I ask more questions about this? Do I let this person continue to tell me their story and see what they're going to reveal? Do I ask directly about what might have happened? The choice I made in the moment was to let that student continue to tell their story. I look back on that incident now, and I think that was an okay choice. But I think back to that moment, and by now, this was almost 10 years ago that I sat with this student. And I think about that student, I can pull her up in my mind's eye. And I think, I waited for her to tell me. But I think in that moment, she had given me enough information to tell me that she needed help. And I didn't choose to ask more directly, and I didn't choose to ask more questions. And I regret that now, because I think I missed an opportunity to help that person. And the reason I missed that opportunity is because I wasn't quite sure how to ask. I wasn't quite sure, even with all my training to that point, how to take a second look and check in and say, I've heard you say these things. What else do you want to tell me? Or I'm concerned about what happened based on what you said. And give that person an opportunity to speak more. I share that personal connection with you just to say that we all have times that we are going to be faced with the opportunity to make choices about what we want to do. In that moment, I made a choice that was an okay one, but now looking back and knowing more, I think I wish I'd acted differently. Hopefully today you will get some information that going forward over your time at Evergreen, you will be able to make the choices that you want to make and take action when you wish to do so. So the question is, do something or do nothing. The best way I know to get you to think about this is to ask you to make it personal for just a moment. So this is challenge by choice, but I'd like to ask everyone to close their eyes. I'd like to ask you to pull up in your mind's eye a loved one. Perhaps it's someone that you left at home, maybe a brother or sister or sibling, a parent, grandparent, or other elder. Perhaps you have a child of your own. Picture that loved one in your mind's eye. Now imagine, and I won't linger here, that someone might hurt that person. Someone is about to come up to them and hurt them in some way. Now, imagine that there's a third person in your mind's eye. There's your loved one, someone who's about to hurt them, and the third person who is faced with the choice to do something or do nothing to help your loved one. You can open your eyes. Now, some of you might think, wow, I am super pissed at this person who is about to hurt my loved one. But I'm jacked up about the third person in that situation, right? In my mind's eye, I'm screaming at that person who's a bystander, saying, don't you see my loved one about to be hurt in this situation? Why won't you act? You have the capacity to do something. I know you have it in you. I believe in your greatness. Why aren't you going to help my loved one? And you all will be that third person in this situation. It's not a matter of if, it's a when. When you are going through your time here at Evergreen, you will be faced with this decision where you are someone who has the capability to help someone else's loved one. I'll have to have them see the slides on this one. So this is a cultural issue. Now, hear me when I say, having to stand here and tell you this is a cultural issue, I can already see some people going, oh brother, how do we deal with that, right? Because it's something that feels insurmountable. But what we know about culture is that it actually changes all the time. And I've got a few examples here that I'll take you through. So you can see up here on the screens, I have a picture of myself. I'm wearing the Evergreen tie-dye shirt from the bookstore. I know some of you have it, I've seen you wearing them. I'm wearing this sort of super hiking, high-tech apparel shorts. I'm wearing socks and sandals. Yikes. Yes. Hey, oh, hold on, listen to my whole story. Listen to my whole story, people. You may also note that I'm giving the picture taker a look like, what? I'm getting coffee here. I'm on vacation in Glacier National Park. Now, here's the thing. Some of you might remember from this morning that I told you I'm from the great state of New Jersey. Going on a camping vacation, not something I'm generally disposed to doing. I'm on a camping vacation in this photo. I'm wearing this super high-tech hiking apparel. I don't think I knew what that was before I moved to the Pacific Northwest in 2007. I'm wearing the socks and sandals, which in my culture is not something you do. How did it get to be this way, right? Like, this picture was taken in 2014. I moved here in 2007. 7 years. That's not a long time to go from, I would not be caught dead in socks and sandals, to here I am on vacation. How did that happen? I had to make the individual choices over time, right? I had to buy the high-tech hiking apparel. I had to say, yeah, sure, let's go on vacation camping. What? I had to make the choice to buy the sandals. I had to make the choice to put them on that morning with the socks. Oh, I'm just gonna put these on while we get coffee before I put my hiking boots on. And now there's photographic evidence. And I've shown it to all of you. Could be a regrettable decision later, we'll see. So in 7 years, I went from the person I was when I moved here in 2007 to someone wearing socks and sandals at a coffee stand. That's part of my culture change, right? But we see this all the time. How many Pokemon Go players do we have? I missed this earlier when Nancy asked you. Yeah. So like one day this existed in our culture, and the next day, one day it didn't exist, and the next day it was everywhere. Yes? You remember this phenomenon, right? One day it was sort of like people walking around, and the next day it was people walking around, right? One day it was like I had really forgotten about Pikachu, and the next day it was like Pikachu and all Pikachu's friends were dominating a national conversation. We had highway bulletin boards, digital bulletin boards across highways reminding people not to search for Pokemon while they're driving, because that's dangerous, right? How did this go from not existing to taking over and dominating our conversation? I mean, the number of news articles I saw in my social media feeds was crazy, right? It was every individual person that started playing Pokemon Go, And then I'm playing, you're playing, then this whole half of the room is playing, and then this half of the room gets jealous, and so they start playing because they're like, I want in on that, right? So it goes from being this one thing to having individual users sign up to do this, and then those users telling their friends, hey, there's this cool game, and then those people are signing up, right? And so then we have a whole room full of people who are playing Pokemon Go when it might have started with these first two tables up front. And that happened very quickly in the case of the Pokemon Go. That's a culture change, right? It didn't exist in our culture, and then suddenly it was everywhere. Many of us have smartphones, AKA tiny computers that we carry in our pockets that we call phones, but rarely use for phoning. Yeah, how did that happen, right? I can remember when I was a kid, my parent had a giant brick of a thing called a car phone because it needed to be mounted in your car, right? And now, many of you are probably walking around with an iPhone or an Android or some other thing where you're able to text message, check your social media. I asked people earlier today, like, hey, use any of your resources to find out the location of a campus support service. Many people pulled out a smartphone. How did that happen? How is it that every Apple product launch is like a thing, right? It's one person who gets the new phone, and the next person gets the new phone, and then it's like, oh, we're totally obsessed with Apple. And now we're gonna line up outside the Apple store for the 2 days beforehand and camp out. That's culture change. Facebook. Facebook, actually, I had started using this example a couple years ago, and now I think I might need to find a new example because it was like, everyone's on Facebook. And now if I asked you, most of you are probably like, yeah, no Facebook, right? Like, we've moved on, right? One of our student athletes was like, yeah, we've totally moved on because people of your generation are on Facebook. And I was like, hey, what the heck, dude? Right? But so Facebook now, right, it went from being a few students at Harvard to you have to have a .edu email address to get an account, to then anybody can get an account, to like now that's not the cool thing to use anymore, right? There's Snapchat or other cool and hip things that people are using for social media. So we know that culture change sounds hard, but we actually know that culture changes all the time. And that culture changes through an accumulation of individual actions and the influence that we exert on each other. This is how we're going to think about green dot. So, if you first think about a red dot, in this case, we're looking at a map of the United States, and maybe there's a couple of red dots here in Washington State. You might have seen movies like I Am Legend, or I think there's a recent TV commercial out that's using some of this. And maybe it's something like, yes, sir, there's an epidemic in Washington State, right? An epidemic of some disease. And these red dots on the map represent those cases. And then, sir, it's spreading. If we don't do something, it will take over the country. And those red dots continue to spread. And eventually, they take over the country. Now think about a map of our campus. This is an illustration, not a depiction of actual events. We have red dots on our campus. A red dot is the moment it takes for someone to raise their hand to strike their partner. A red dot is an individual moment in time when it takes someone to make the choice to have sex with someone without their consent. A red dot is the 2 minutes it takes for someone to use their words to threat, intimidate, or coerce someone else. A red dot is the moment that it takes to send a text message that's the 300th text message of the last day to a partner who has told you, leave me alone. These red dots are on our campus map. They're in our residence halls, they're in our classroom buildings, they're in our parking lots, they're all over our campus. And so if we think about the previous example where the whole United States map was taken over by the red dots, we don't want that to happen on our campus, right? We don't want the red dots to start to accumulate and take over to make our whole campus red. How do we do that? Green dot's a mirror to the problem. So each individual green dot is an action that you can take in a moment in time to choose to make our campus safer. Green dots are something like being at a party and you know that something's not quite right. Maybe you see someone who's leaving and you're like, that person didn't come with those other people, or it looks like that person's trying to separate this other person from their friends. I don't have a good feeling about this. And in that moment, you choose to do something. Maybe take the person who's intoxicated and say, hey, can I walk you home? Maybe it's saying to someone, hey, did you come here with this person? Do you know where their friends are? Maybe it's even something as simple as like, hey, you, weren't you in my program first quarter? Or didn't I meet you at orientation? To distract from the situation. A green dot is anything that you can do in an individual moment in time that makes a risky situation less risky. The goal is for the green dots to outnumber and displace the red dots that are on our map. Does that make sense? Can I get a head nod? Yeah? Or a head nod? Maybe that's not really a nod, head shake. Okay. There are two categories of green dots. Proactive green dots. These are things that you can do anytime that communicate violence will not be tolerated here and everyone's expected to do their part. We can see this pretty easily here at the Evergreen State College if we think about throwing away our trash. We can think about how this proactive culture setting works. Anybody here go up to a bank of trash cans and have to stand there for a puzzled moment and think, which bin does this go in? Right? Here's the thing I gotta tell you, I started working here in 2013, and sometimes I still stand in front of the bins sort of quizzically for a moment. Maybe that means the information's not sinking in very well. I'm not sure. But I still have to stand there for just a second and go, what am I holding? Which picture does it match? Okay, it goes here. Right? When you have to stand there for a second and think about where you're throwing away your trash, what does that tell you? It tells you we value sustainability. We're not sending everything to a landfill in a landfill trash can. We're asking you to say, this goes to a landfill, this gets recycled, this can be composted. And you have to separate your paper from your glass, right? So we are saying to all of you, just through the way that you need to throw away your trash, we value sustainability here. And many of you who have taken a campus tour or have gotten immersed in the culture in the last couple days, that probably resonates as true with you, right? Yeah, so proactive green dots are things like that. Things like if you have the opportunity in a class to write a paper, maybe you can write a paper on how sexual violence, discrimination, or harassment affect a community that you're a part of. Maybe a proactive green dot is wearing the green dot pins that we'll have available for folks who want to join us in this movement at the end. Maybe a proactive green dot you can do is telling someone who wasn't here today about the session you saw. Hey, dude, so we saw this green dot session. I totally learned a lot about how I can make our campus safer. That's a green dot. Those are proactive things where we can tell people violence will not be tolerated here and everyone's expected to do their part. Sorry, I just had to do a time check real quick to make sure that I'm gonna move it along enough. Reactive green dots. So those are the kinds of things that you're gonna do. In that party situation, if you see someone leaving and you don't have a good feeling about that, can you say something to someone? Maybe you're waiting at the bus stop and you sort of have a sense that the other person waiting there with you is just yelling at their partner on the phone. It looks bad. Maybe you take your headphones out and you're like, hey, did the 48 come yet? Those are reactive green dots, things that you can do in a moment when you're like, this situation's not quite right, right? My tummy voice tells me this is not quite right, and I'm gonna choose to act on that. I got a little ahead of myself there. So what keeps us from doing green dots, right? Hopefully I've made enough of a case at this point that you think, yeah, I wanna do something, and yeah, it sounds easy enough, I think I could do it. But there are things that keep us from doing green dots. Your personal obstacles. So here's the thing. I tend to be a big extrovert, and I'm gonna just generally sort of go up to people and be like, hey, how's it going? Did you come here with this person? What's going on here, right? That's my style. Now, if that was the only way to do green dots, anyone in this room who thinks, I'm sort of introverted and I definitely am not about confrontation, all of you would be like, yeah, green dot sounds great, but I'm not doing green dots. I just can't do that. Right? So your personal obstacles might be things like, I'm shy, or I don't like confrontation, or it feels hard for me to sort of butt into somebody's business, maybe. So those personal obstacles are things that you can overcome, right? Because there's a variety of ways to do green dots. We also have social and peer pressure obstacles, right? Sorry, I think I'm getting stuck. Social and peer pressure obstacles. So it may not be the norm, particularly wherever you came from, to sort of check in or take a second look or intervene in some way. As bystanders, we actually know that people are affected by bystander dynamics. If I'm in a giant crowd of people and I have an emergency, I am actually less likely to have someone call for help than if I'm in a very small group of people, right? Because everyone in that giant crowd thinks someone else is gonna call for medical help for me if I have an emergency. Whereas in a small group of people, they're all gonna know, oh, someone has to call. It's called diffusion of responsibility. Anybody here who's taken a high school psych class or any of our transfer students, yeah, probably know about that, right? So that means if we're in this big crowd, I probably am less likely to get help. So we know that we have these obstacles facing us. We also know that sometimes it's just not gonna be cool, right? If you're at that party scene and you're the person who decides, yeah, I'm gonna do something in this moment, you might be like, yeah, you know what? I might lose a little face. I might be embarrassed here. I might even have people call me names. So there are obstacles to overcome when you choose to do these things. What are some solutions? So there's 3 categories of green dots, and these are mostly reactive things. So direct. Those are some of the examples I gave you, like directly going up to someone, talking to them, talking to the person you think might be at risk. Distract. So this is a category of green dots that just distract from what's going on for a moment in time. Example, I was driving my car home. I was going eastbound on Harrison, and I was at Cooper Point and Harrison by the Safeway. And I was waiting at the traffic light. And I'm in my car, and there's another lane of traffic over here, and someone else is in their car. And I'm waiting there at the red light, which is really unusually long, I gotta tell you. At least it feels that way. So I'm there in my car, look over, and this is what I see. Okay? So I see someone sort of like swatting something or maybe like telling someone to stop kicking their seat, right? So I imagine what this translates to in my brain is like, oh, the first thing I think is this person is telling their dog to get down, because often I have my dog in my back seat and I'm saying, Xander, get down, right? Or that they're telling a child to stop kicking the seat, right? But then I take a second look, and I notice that actually it looks like there's another person in the car who's sort of cowered up against the passenger door of the car. And I said, oh, I don't think this situation is what I thought it was at first. I think this person might be hitting the passenger in their car. And so I thought, okay, green dot, this is what I do for a living. What am I gonna do? And I initially had the thought, I'm gonna tell you this, of, oh dear, I don't really wanna do anything. I'm having somebody over for dinner, and this could be a situation, and I don't know if I wanna get involved. And I said, nope, those are all social peer pressure and my own personal obstacles. I know what to do, I'm gonna do something. So I start honking my horn. I start trying to distract this person from what they're doing, right? And I'm honking my horn. In New Jersey, where I'm from, honking the horn could mean just about anything from like, hey, to get out of my way, right? But here in the Pacific Northwest, it generally means imminent collision. Emergency, pay attention. So I'm honking the horn in an attempt to distract this person. Last type of green dot, delegate. So can you get someone else to do the green dot? Can you let someone else at the party know, hey, I think your friend's about to leave with someone? Or, hey, I saw your friend dancing with this other person, and it looked like they were kind of all over them, or maybe being a creeper, right? And so you get somebody else to do the green dot. Going back to the example in my car, I'm not gonna leave you hanging for the end of the story. I heard some grumbling, don't worry. So I'm there in my car. The person does not respond to the fact that I'm honking my horn. It could have been dead silent, like this person was not gonna stop what they were doing. And I thought, well, crap, now what am I gonna do, right? I'm in my car, I can't what I want to do is directly say something, but I can't really get out of my car and go up and like knock on somebody's window. Not to mention that might have been a compromise of safety at that point, so probably don't wanna compromise my safety. So I decide what I'm gonna do is when the light changes green and we start to drive away, I'm gonna get behind the car and I'm gonna call 911 to get the police to intervene. And so I get behind the car, I get the license plate number, I call 911, I get dispatch on the phone, and I say, hey, I think I've witnessed a domestic violence in progress. I think I saw someone hitting the passenger of their car. This is the make and model. This is the license plate. Can you send someone to help? And so lo and behold, here I am driving down Harrison, and there's an Ole Police Department vehicle right next to me. And that person, the police officer, goes to pull over these people. And as I drove away, I thought, okay, I might be more involved in this than I want to be at this point, right? Because I know the police are going to come to my house and try to follow up with me and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm glad I did something. And I did get a call from the police later. And the officer said to me, can you tell me again what you saw? Because both of these people are injured and bloody. Both of these people look like they're hurt. And we want to get help for both of these people. And so I'm glad that even though at first I was thinking, I don't want to get involved in this situation because I got my friend coming over for dinner and all this other stuff, that eventually, because I had other options, I could distract someone, I could delegate, in this case to the police. And that's not going to work for everyone, I understand that. But in this example, it was the best thing I could think of. That I could get help for two people who were clearly in need of it. So the goal is that if we have someone who wants to put a red dot on our map, all of you are standing there with your green dots, and you can walk up and put that green dot right in the way of the person who wishes to put the red dot on our community. And many of you might be tempted to think, oh, this person holding the red dot in this graphic, this is someone else, this is someone other, this isn't someone from our community. What we know about how sexual assault, relationship violence, and stalking, what we know about how they play out on college campuses, is that it's people we know, people who are already a part of our community, are hurting people who are part of our community. Very few things happen from people who are strangers. And so the people who might put red dots on our map are folks you're sitting next to, folks you're going to go to class with. They're not villains or monsters. They're just people who may make a decision to hurt someone. And we know that we can put our green dots in that person's way. I've got a movie for you about choices and the choices you'll face. Carlos, will you play that choices video for me? No.
Our choices, they are the essence of our being. Who we are comes down to the choices we make. When we are faced with a high-risk or problematic situation, we only have two choices: do something or do nothing. You are about to meet people who have done both. Like all of us, they each decided to act or not to act based on their own obstacles, and in that choice, they defined themselves. Bystander action doesn't have to be a big deal. A man and woman begin to physically fight on a New York subway train. Another passenger on the train sees the fight and casually moves between them, keeping them from reaching each other. He doesn't confront them or try to make a big scene. He just eats his chips. The fight calms down, and the man never has to interrupt his lunch. A teenage girl was raped and beaten by a group of young males in a courtyard behind her high school after a homecoming dance. It was discovered later that as many as 20 people saw what was happening, but chose to do nothing. The incident was not even reported to the police until 2 hours after it happened. A military cadet recalls an important night when he was a powerful bystander. He was at a club on a Saturday night with his friends when he noticed a guy, known for assaulting women, dancing with a girl he knew. At first, he took her arm and pulled her away, but she shot him a dirty look. Instead of giving up, he just asked her to dance and continued dancing with her and hanging out all evening. Eventually, he got her home safely at the end of the night. Later, she called to thank him because she heard that guy had assaulted another woman. A young college woman was killed by her boyfriend. Her teammates and friends had observed her boyfriend's aggressive behavior toward her during their relationship. Once, they had even been forced to pull him away from her at a party to keep him from hurting her. Ultimately, he attacked her at her apartment and killed her. A quick-thinking commuter saved a teenager who apparently suffered a seizure and fell onto subway tracks in Upper Manhattan by jumping onto the tracks himself and pushing them both between the rails beneath the oncoming train.
On the New York City subway, it's hard enough finding someone who will give up his seat to a stranger, let alone be willing to give up his life for one.
The train was coming in like that.
It happened just 50-year-old Wesley Autry, a construction worker and Navy veteran, was standing on a subway platform with his two little girls when right in front of them, a man started having a seizure.
He kind of stumbled and over his own feet and fall backwards. I see a train coming, but the train is so close, I'm like, what do I do?
Wesley jumped onto the tracks and thought if he could just lie on top of the man, keep him from flailing, maybe the train would roll right over both of them. The clearance was exactly 21 inches. Wesley and the man, 20 and a half.
No way the train can stop before this gentleman could get him up off the tracks. So he covered him with his body and pushed him down to a point where the train wouldn't hit his head and held him down under the tracks while the train came and rolled right over the top of him.
It gave Wesley's children the scare of their young lives, and Wesley the scare of his, too.
I'm like talking to him, sir, you can't move. I got two kids up here looking for their father to come back. I don't know you, you don't know me, but listen, don't panic. You know, I'm here to save you.
As for the guy Wesley saved, he's 20-year-old Cameron Hollipter, and other than a few scrapes and bruises, his father says he's doing fine.
Mr. Autry's instinctive and unselfish act saved our son's life.
You know, the word hero gets thrown around a lot nowadays.
What a better way to say it to start off the new year than to save a life.
Nice to be reminded of what one really looks like. Steve Hartman, CBS News, New York.
Each of these individuals faced a crisis, and each had their own internal obstacles. Some chose action, some chose inaction. This isn't about judgment or criticism. This is about you taking a breath to sit with the question, how will you self-define?
So the point of the video, in addition to having you see bystanders in action who made choices about doing something or doing nothing, and the range of choices that they make, I gotta tell you, Wesley Autry jumping on the train tracks, I don't know if that's a bystander thing I would be capable of doing. I think I might fear for my safety a bit in that situation. But I wanted you to see the range of choices that people made. And I wanted you to see that bystanders, there is no one definition or one picture of what a bystander looks like. There isn't one definition or one picture of what someone who is a victim looks like. Bystanders look as different as you in the room. You all have the opportunity to be bystanders. You have the opportunity to say, in a moment when I'm faced with a high-risk situation, will I choose to do something or will I choose to do nothing? And so I ask you, what's your green dot? If you want to join our movement, if you want to be an active bystander, I have folks standing at the doors to hand out pins as you depart today. You can wear that pin on your backpack or on your swag bag that you got at orientation. That's a green dot. When people ask you what that green dot's about, what are you going to say? Can you tell them about something you learned today? Can you tell them about, hey, you could check out the blog at Evergreen Dot? What kinds of things can you tell people when they ask you, like, what's up with that button? What are you going to say? So if you'd like to join us in the movement, if you'd like to make the choice to do something in the moment to make this campus safer, I'd ask you to take a button on your way out. I'll close with some words of wisdom. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment to start to improve the world. Anne Frank. Thank you for coming, thank you for your attention, and thank you for your engagement. I have a couple of announcements. Whoops. I told Jaden I was going to forget this. He said, if you have not picked up your ID card, you should pick it up somewhere. At the cab info desk. Thank you for saving me. And that there will be a surprise ice cream break. Jaden's coming up to tell you. Run, Jaden. Come on. We're waiting. I've already said the words ice cream. Everyone's very excited. I'm sorry.
All right, there's music out in the courtyard. And how many of you have finished writing your orientation essay? Oh my gosh. Well, for those of you who haven't, from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock this evening in the library computer center, the computer center is going to be open. There are going to be writing tutors there to help you out, and there's going to be pizza.
Wait, I thought it was ice cream.
Ice cream's right now.
Oh.
So go check that out. If you haven't typed it up, go there to type up your essay. Make sure you get it done because you're reading it tomorrow in your session. Have a nice afternoon, everybody.